Rob, is there any substance to Vladimir Putin's claims that this was a provocation on the part of the Ukrainians planned all along?
Well, it's not without credibility, but I think it's probably exaggerated. It may be the case that the Ukrainians recognize that it would be provocative to send those 3 ships to pass through the Strait of Kerch into the Sea of Azov. They may, we don't know for sure, have not notified the Russians sufficiently in advance. They may even have maneuvered provocatively, although the Ukrainians say they didn't. But I think, the idea that the Ukrainians would have anticipated the aggressiveness of the Russian response and then use that to create this international instance and this domestic crisis, I think is stretching things way too far. I think the Ukrainians were as shocked as anybody by the aggression of the Russians and the subsequent arrest of the 24 sailors, and then that sort of show performance when 3 of them were brought out on television. The sort of scene we usually have come to expect from terrorist organizations, not from a veto-carrying member, permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. So, yes, there was provocation probably from the Ukrainian side, but the idea that President Poroshenko was some sort of Machiavellian maestro who calculated the Russians will act with so much aggression that we can then demand to introduce martial law inside Ukraine, I think is absurd.
So we're talking here about this very narrow Kerch Strait. What does international law say about these waters and who can legally go through them? Well,
there are a number of things. First of all, there's the agreement between Russia and Ukraine of 2003, which states that these are territorial waters shared by both. And then in addition to that, there's the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Now, what it says is that all ships, including foreign warships, enjoy the right of innocent passage within another state's territorial waters, so long as their passage is innocent. Now, what is innocent? Now, according to the same Convention on the Law of the Sea, it is innocent so long as it is not prejudicial to the peace, good order, or security of the coastal state. So if this were to go to international arbitration, and there's every possibility it will to find a solution to the situation, the Russians would have to demonstrate that there had been a threat or use of force, exercise or practice of weapons, or any other act of propaganda which would affect the security of the state, in other words, Russia. I think it will find it is very difficult for Russia to do that. So the Russians will be very reluctant to put this international arbitration, but the Ukrainians will probably seek to do that and milk international sympathy.
So how do we see this playing out, Rob? We've got now martial law in Ukraine, these Ukrainian prisoners being paraded on Russian television, talk of sanctions. Where do we think this is going?
Well, it certainly doesn't look good. At a time when people have been hoping that relations between Russia and the Western world might start to improve, that there might be the possibility of lightening the sanctions load on Russia, this pushes things in exactly the opposite direction. I don't think this means that there's any danger of war between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine is not so foolish as to provoke Russia to go that far. It would be devastating for the Ukrainians. They would clearly lose in an armed conflict, and certainly there will be immense pressure on Ukraine from the Western world and from NATO not to be sucked into a conflict like that. They'll say, remember what happened to Georgia in 2008 when it was sucked into a conflict with Russia and lost heavily. But obviously, this does not make things good. That you refer to the parading of the prisoners on television. It's an ugly spectacle, which again points to Russia's constant failure to develop soft power in international relations. It resorts still to the use of these bully boy tactics, which assert Russia's presence on the world, remind the rest of the world that Russia is a power to be dealt with, but does not really project an image that the rest of the world finds attractive. So I think relations will sour. Any prospect of an improvement in relations between the West and Russia will be put off by months at least, possibly by even longer.
Thank you for that, Rob. That's our Chief Foreign Editor, Robert Parsons.